I set the table with care that morning, white linen cloth, my husband's old crystal glasses, and 7 matching blue tulip teacups, the ones I'd been saving since the 1980s. Each cup rested on a hand-crocheted coaster. I made lemon cake, the good one. My arthritis didn't stop me from folding the whipped cream just right. 70, not a number I feared. I was proud. I had raised a son on my own after my husband died, paid off the house, helped raise my granddaughter when Emily had postpartum blues. I taught reading at the library even after my knees gave up on stairs. I wasn't perfect, but I showed up. I always showed up. So I thought this year I'd throw a party, just a little one. No RSVP needed, just family. Just my son, his wife, my sweet granddaughter, maybe a neighbour or two. I texted them a week before. I'm cooking on Saturday. Come hungry. It's my 70th. I even added a smiley face. Saturday came. The flowers I bought, freesias and garden roses, started to lean by 2 p.m. The cake began to sweat. By 3 o'clock, the tea had cooled. At 4:15, I sat alone, the tulip cups untouched. One had a tiny chip I hadn't noticed before. At 5:10, my phone lit up. Sorry, something came up. Rain check? It was from my son. No name, just that. A digital shrug. Emily didn't write at all. I held the chipped teacup, turning it slowly. I used to think cracks made things useless, but I'd learned. Sometimes they just reveal where the heat was. I took one slow sip and whispered to the silence. So this is how you disappear. Not with a scream, with no knock at the door. I didn't cry, not right away. I just folded the napkins back up and put the cake in the freezer. I told myself maybe they were busy, maybe something had happened, but deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the first time they hadn't come. It was just the first time I admitted it. But what I didn't know then was that this small, empty party, this quiet humiliation was only the beginning. Because a week later, I would find out what Emily really thought of me, and this time there would be no forgiveness. Just one blue teacup, one signed paper, and one very public video, and a different kind of celebration. That chipped blue teacup stayed on the counter for days. I couldn't bring myself to wash it. Every time I passed by, I glanced at it like it might explain something, like it might say, "It wasn't you." But I didn't hear that. Instead, I heard my own voice, asking questions no one would answer. Maybe I picked the wrong weekend. Maybe they didn't see the message. Maybe I should have called instead of texting. So I opened my phone again, scrolling through my sent messages. Come hungry. It's my 70th. No typos. Sent to the family group chat. Read by everyone. Then I remembered the flowers. I had chosen freesias and yellow roses, just like the ones I carried in my wedding bouquet. The petals were curled now, browning at the edges. I held one stem and thought, 70 years. And still wondering if I'm enough. My neighbour, Lorraine, came by to return a casserole dish. She peeked inside and blinked at the untouched cake. Oh, you didn't have your little get-together yet. I smiled politely. It was Saturday. Her eyebrows knit. Oh, I just saw your daughter-in-law at the grocery store that afternoon. I thought maybe it was next weekend. I tilted my head. She was out. Lorraine nodded. Big cart of snacks. Looked like party stuff to me. It hit like cold wind under the door. I nodded again, more to myself than her. Probably just coincidence. That night, I sat on my porch swing with a cardigan wrapped around my shoulders and a blanket over my knees. I looked across the street at Emily and Jason's porch. It was dark, no motion, no answers. And that's when I whispered out loud, just a small confession to no one but the wind. I raised him to remember birthdays. I really did. But the truth is, doubt crawled deeper that night. I didn't know yet what Emily had said. I didn't know that I hadn't just been forgotten. I had been excluded. That porch swing didn't creak that night. I sat still, like maybe if I didn't move, my questions wouldn't get any louder. The cardigan slipped from one shoulder. I let it fall. I didn't pick it back up. Inside, I turned off the living room light and walked past the hallway photo wall. Jason at graduation. Emily with the baby in her arms. Me, always in the corner of the frame. I stared at one photo longer than the rest. Christmas, 7 years ago. Jason had made pancakes shaped like reindeer. Emily had looked straight at the camera, holding her fork mid-air. My arm had reached into frame with a mug. That was all of me you could see. That same mug sat on the counter now. I picked it up without thinking. The tea inside had gone cold. Again, my phone buzzed in my robe pocket. Mrs. Carson, this is Nicole from Union Savings. We just wanted to verify that you did approve the closure of the joint signature protection clause on your primary account last month. I blinked. I'm sorry. What clause? The secondary signer, Jason Carson, called in October and submitted a request to remove the dual authorization. We have it logged here under your profile, and the signature matches your records. My signature, I whispered. Yes, Ma'am. Would you like us to email you the scanned copy? I couldn't speak. I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. Yes, please. I stood there with the phone still pressed to my cheek long after the call had ended. I didn't even remember when Jason had last come over. October. I pulled out my planner from the kitchen drawer. The last entry under October read, Ellie's spelling bee, baked shortbread, Jason late. Emily didn't speak. I sat down slowly. I wasn't sure if it was the financial detail or the memory of that short entry that made my chest feel tight. Both, maybe. I looked again at the picture frames on the hallway wall. This wasn't just about a missed birthday. This was a pattern, a steady quieting of my place in the story. And the scariest part, I had let it happen. One event, one email, one bite of shortbread at a time. The next morning, I left the planner open on the kitchen table. I didn't write anything new. It just sat there, like a wound still breathing. The words from October, Jason late, Emily didn't speak, felt heavier now, as if they had aged overnight. The sun filtered through the sheer curtains and landed on the photos across the hall. Same hallway, same frames. I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the family photo from Jason and Emily's 5th anniversary, I wasn't in the centre anymore. I was way off to the left, nearly out of frame. My hand, barely resting on the cake tray, my place kept moving, farther from the middle, farther from meaning. I picked up the old cardigan from the back of the couch, wore it without thinking. It still smelled faintly of cinnamon and lavender, like my kitchen in fall, like memory. Then I walked into the guest room. That's what they called it now. The room used to be Ellie's. I had painted the walls lavender for her 7th birthday. Emily said it was too stimulating, but I did it anyway. I sat on the edge of the little bed, still made up with a quilt I'd sewn during chemo. No one used the room anymore, but on the dresser was something I hadn't noticed in months. A crayon drawing in a plastic frame, 3 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Grandma, Daddy, me. I sat down and just stared. There was no Emily in the picture and no date, no caption. I reached up and touched the glass. Dust clung to my fingertip. I whispered, "Did you draw this before she told you not to?" My voice barely made sound, like it might break something if it did. That's when I heard a light knock. Just 2 soft taps. Ellie stood in the hallway, holding a book. She looked hesitant. "Grandma, can I read here?" I smiled. Of course, sweet pea. She crawled up onto the quilt beside me, and I wrapped one arm around her. We read in silence, Charlotte's Web. Same as always, I traced the words with my finger as she mouthed them. But I was watching her face more than the pages. Because there, in that tiny drawing, in that small voice, mouthing "some pig," was something I thought I had already lost. Reading with Ellie should have grounded me, and it did for a moment. But when she left to go back across the street, clutching her book and saying, "Mommy says it's dinner time," the silence wrapped itself back around the room like a cold shawl. I went to the kitchen. My planner still lay open. The phrase, "Jason late." Emily didn't speak, stared up at me like a judgment. I flipped the page, then another. The entries thinned. In April, I'd written about a small bank fee I didn't recognise. In June, I'd marked "Talk to Jason about joint account," no follow-up. By October, the only note was a single underlined word. Closed? I pulled the bank folder from the drawer beside the fridge. It still had the paper band from Union Savings, creased but intact. Inside, statements, legal forms, and a copy of the original joint authorization form with Jason's name next to mine. But behind that, loose and separate, sat a new document, one I didn't remember receiving. The paper was thinner, the ink slightly blurred. But my signature was there, slanted right, like always, but something felt off. The date read October 11th, the same week Jason had said he stopped by while I was napping. A chill ran up my back. I looked closer. The signature had the right shape, but not the pressure. The E didn't loop the same way I always looped it. I'd signed my name the same way since high school. This felt mimicked, copied. I picked up the house phone and called Union Savings. "Can you send me a notarized record of who submitted this in person?" The woman paused. "That request has to come from a legal proxy, ma'am. I am the account holder." "According to our records," she said gently, "that's no longer singular. You added a secondary trustee last fall." I closed my eyes. The room felt like it was tilting. I didn't remember doing that. No meeting, no call, no consent. I had taught Ellie how to write her name last year. I knew what real signatures looked like. I sat down at the table and gripped the arms of the chair. My heart thudded, not from panic, but from something deeper. Recognition. This wasn't an oversight, it was a plan. And I was no longer sure who had drawn the lines of it. I needed air. After the call with the bank, the kitchen felt like it was shrinking. I grabbed my coat and walked down the street toward the cafe on Maple and 4th, the one with the lemon scones I used to share with Ellie. Lorraine was already there, sitting near the window with her crossword puzzle and a half-empty cup. She looked up. "Oh, Edith, I meant to tell you. I saw a few folks from your family at the community centre last weekend. Big birthday thing." I stopped. "What?" She smiled kindly, unaware of the sting in her words. "Yeah, I think it was Jason's wife's side. Balloons and streamers. Ellie was wearing a pink crown, I think. I thought maybe they threw it for you too." My chest went still. "No," I said, steady but flat. "That wasn't mine." Lorraine blinked. "Oh, I must have assumed. You know how these things go." I nodded. "Sure." But I didn't even taste the tea I ordered. I just sat there, gripping the edge of the table, feeling my nails press into the underside of the wood. They had planned a party, just not mine, a birthday, on the same weekend, at a public space. And I wasn't even invited as a guest. I walked home slower. My feet felt like they didn't quite belong to me. When I opened the door, Ellie was sitting on my steps, alone. Her backpack slumped beside her, open. A crumpled worksheet peeked out with a big red star. She looked up. "Hi, Grandma." "Hey, sweetheart, where's your mum?" "She's mad. I said I wanted to show you the poem I wrote at school." I knelt slowly, heart hammering. "And what did she say?" Ellie bit her lip. She said, "Don't bring Grandma into this again. She's not part of our story." Her words weren't bitter. She was just repeating. But I felt something rip, quietly, like paper torn from a notebook too quickly. Ellie reached into her backpack and handed me the poem. It was about family meals, and the last line read, "My real favourite part is Grandma's cinnamon bread." I smiled, genuinely, but I didn't know what to say. Emily had made a list, a guest list, and I wasn't on it. I read the poem twice after Ellie went back home. The line about the cinnamon bread stayed with me. I hadn't made it in months. I wasn't sure if I even had the strength in my wrists anymore to knead the dough, but I remembered the smell. Warm sugar, nutmeg, and thyme. The kitchen clock ticked softly. I stood at the counter, still holding her poem like it was glass. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the old wooden recipe box, and took out the stained index card labelled Ellie's Cinnamon Bread. It had a heart drawn in the corner. Her hand, from when she was 5. I laid the card on the counter and just looked at it. I didn't cook, I didn't cry, I just stood there. Then the doorbell rang. 3 short chimes. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found Emily. Not looking angry, not warm, just blank. She held out a manila envelope. "This is from Jason," she said. "He thought you should have it sooner." I took it without a word. She turned to leave, then hesitated. "You shouldn't make things harder, Edith." "Harder for who?" I asked softly. She didn't answer, just walked back down the steps in her heeled boots, one clicking louder than the other. Inside, I opened the envelope. It wasn't legal papers. It was artwork, Ellie's drawings, 5 of them, all folded neatly. Each one had been cut from her bedroom wall. One showed a house with 2 windows, stick figures inside. One labelled me, the other Dad. No Grandma. Another showed a table with cake, but only 3 chairs. At the bottom of the last one, she had written in crayon, "I got told not to draw Grandma anymore." I sat down fast, breath catching in my chest. I hadn't seen these, hadn't known. And right there, between anger and heartbreak, something else cut in. Not despair, resolve. I picked up the recipe card and smoothed the corner flat. Then I opened the fridge. Eggs, milk. I tied my apron and preheated the oven, not because I'd forgiven them, but because somewhere in those drawings, Ellie had left space, and I intended to fill it. The kitchen smelled like it used to, warm butter, vanilla, and something sweeter, memory. I packed 2 slices of the cinnamon bread into a tin lined with parchment paper. I hadn't written a note, just tucked the recipe card underneath. Maybe that was all the explanation needed. It was almost 5 p.m. when I walked across the street. Their porch had 2 carved pumpkins still sitting out, already soft and caving at the sides. No one had bothered to toss them. I rang the bell. Emily opened the door. She wore a slate grey sweater, hair tied back, face unreadable. Behind her, I could hear the faint sound of a children's cartoon. "Hi," I said softly. "I baked something." Her eyes dropped to the tin. "Oh," she said. "That's unexpected." I smiled faintly. I wasn't sure if Ellie still remembered the taste. Emily stepped aside. "Jason's not home." "That's all right." I walked in. Everything smelled new. Air freshener and plastic nothing like cinnamon or lemon or life. The framed photo of their family sat on the entry table. I wasn't in it. Emily walked towards the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Not a word. I placed the tin on the counter and slowly slid it toward her. "I found Ellie's drawings," I said gently. Her back stiffened. "She's very creative," Emily replied without turning. She left space for me. Finally, she turned, her voice even. She's a child, Edith. She doesn't understand boundaries yet. I blinked. Boundaries? Emily took a sip of water, then set the glass down too precisely. You overstep. You always have. Showing up, dropping off gifts, rewriting traditions without asking. It confuses her. Cinnamon bread is confusing. She sighed. It's not about bread. It's about presence. You don't get to choose where you belong in someone else's house. That landed like frost, slow and killing. I nodded slowly. I thought this was our family. Her voice didn't rise, but her words cut deeper for it. It's my family, Edith, and Jason. Well, Jason is trying to keep peace, but I won't have my daughter pulled between guilt and sentiment. I could have shouted, but I didn't. I looked at the tin between us, then at her. Then I whispered, "You didn't have to erase me to make room for yourself." I turned and walked out. The glass of water still sat untouched on the counter, but the cinnamon bread was missing. I didn't go straight home. Instead, I walked around the block once, then sat on my own front porch, tin empty in my hands. It was dusk, the kind of light that makes the sky look bruised. I stared out at the street lamp, flickering to life, and, for some reason, my eyes drifted to the flower pot near the step. Inside, half buried in soil, was a blue shard. I bent down. It was from one of the old tulip teacups. I didn't even remember breaking it. I cupped the piece gently in my palm, and in that instant, memory rose like steam from a forgotten kettle 3 years earlier. The day Emily moved in after the wedding. Boxes in the living room, Jason's sweating in a college hoodie, Emily standing in the kitchen looking at everything like it was too small. I had set the table with quiet pride, roast chicken, buttered carrots, a small cake, and a pair of new blue tulip teacups, carefully wrapped and placed inside a small gift box. She opened it slowly. "Oh," she said. "They're for afternoon tea," I offered. "Just a tradition. I used to drink with my mother-in-law every Sunday." Emily's face didn't change. She set the box on the counter and turned to Jason. "You didn't tell me your mum collected porcelain." Jason laughed. "She collects everything." I smiled to hide the sting. Later that night, I found the box of cups on top of the fridge, still unopened. Weeks passed. She never used them. One day, Ellie found one and asked to drink milk in it. I said yes. Emily saw and said quietly, "Let's not make habits of things that aren't ours." I washed the cup that night and placed it back in the cupboard, behind the mixing bowls, and I never brought up the teacups again. Present day. The shard felt heavier than it should have. I stood and walked inside, placing it on the kitchen counter next to my recipe card. I looked around at the house, still mine, but dimmer somehow. The space where memories lived had been slowly repainted, box by box, teacup by teacup, and yet something in me refused to fade with it. The next morning, a letter arrived by courier. Thick envelope, no return address, just to Edith Carson, printed neatly in black ink. I opened it at the table, same place I'd laid the recipe card and the teacup shard the night before. Inside were 8 pages, legal paper. I skimmed, the words blurred. Amended trustee designation, temporary rights of residence, authorization limits. I froze at one phrase. Occupant status subject to revocation. Occupant, not owner. I dropped the pages. My fingers were shaking. I wasn't reading a memo. I was reading a quiet eviction, and the names on the bottom, Jason Carson and Emily Ford Carson. I backed away from the table, hands gripping the edge of the counter for balance. Then the phone rang. "Jason," I answered, voice flat. "Hi, Mom. Did you sign something I don't know about?" He hesitated. Just one breath, but I heard it. Emily thought it'd be easier if we consolidated things. My throat tightened. Easier for who? I mean, legally, in case anything happened, we didn't want you burdened with decisions. So you removed mine entirely. Mum, you're overreacting. You're still there. Nothing's changed. I looked at the legal phrase again. Revocation clause may be exercised without notice. You took away my name, I whispered. Off the title, off the power. He said nothing. Did you even read what she asked you to sign? Silence. Then, I trust her. It landed like a final nail. I didn't hang up. I just set the phone down slowly, the line still open. I walked to the living room and looked around at the couch I bought after Jason was born, the bookshelf I stained by hand, the quilt Emily never used, all still in place, but none of it mine anymore. That's when my knees gave out, not from pain, from clarity. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let the weight settle. This wasn't just a family argument. This was a transfer of power, silent, legal, complete, and I hadn't even known it was happening. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed with the legal papers fanned out beside me and the ceiling fan turning slow, like it was waiting for an answer I couldn't give. At 6:12 a.m., I got up and opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. The one with all the if anything happens to me documents, birth certificates, tax forms, and the original will. The one I signed 12 years ago after Harold passed. The one that said the house would go to Jason, but only after my death, not before. It was clear, protected, witnessed. I reread every paragraph. My hands shook, but my memory didn't fail. Then I noticed something, a newer document tucked inside the folder. Different font, no staple, no notary seal. It said, Edith Carson hereby amends the previous testament to transfer property title to Jason Carson and spouse, effective immediately, with right of residence retained. No witness signatures, no initials on the margins, and yet it had my name, my signature, but not my pen. The loops were wrong. The C in Carson didn't curl like mine did. The crossbar on the T in Edith slanted downward, not how I wrote it. I pulled my planner from the desk drawer. On the week of that date, May 3rd, I'd written, Emily picked up prescriptions for me. Jason working late. Nothing about a lawyer, nothing about a signature. I called Charles, my old attorney from when Harold died. Charles, I said, would your office have any record of a will amendment from me? He paused. No, Edith, not unless you came in yourself. I have something with your firm's old letterhead, but not your watermark. Bring it in, he said sharply. Today. I wrapped the page in a plastic protector and tucked it into my purse. But before I left, I opened the cupboard above the stove, the one where I'd hidden the only remaining unbroken tulip teacup. I took it down gently. It was slightly dusted but whole. I set it on the counter beside the forged document and whispered, They want everything I built, but they forgot who built it. Then I picked up my bag, locked the door behind me, and walked out with steadier steps than I had in weeks. I didn't go straight to Charles's office. I needed to see my son's face. The face I'd kissed goodnight through fevers and heartbreak and broken curfews. The face that now sat silently beneath a forged document. I knocked on their front door just after noon. Jason opened it, phone in hand, tie half loosened. He looked surprised, guilty even, but not angry. Mum, hey, is everything okay? I held up the plastic folder with the unsigned amendment. You recognise this? His jaw tensed. Emily said she'd already given that to you. She did, but I want to hear from you. Did you read it? He looked past me, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. She was trying to simplify things, he said softly. It's not as bad as it sounds. It removes me, Jason. She kept the residency clause. She said you'd always have a place here. A place that can be revoked without notice. He rubbed his forehead, voice cracking just enough. She didn't mean for it to feel like that. I stared at him, studying the man I'd raised. Did you sign anything else? Anything you didn't fully read? Jason hesitated, then nodded, barely. She told me it was just paperwork to update emergency contacts. And you believed her. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Silence. Behind the door, I could hear Ellie laughing at a cartoon, the same laugh she used to make on my lap, wrapped in the quilt I'd sewn by hand. Jason followed my gaze. She's trying to build something stable, he said. Emily's mum left when she was 10. She's never trusted family to stay. I softened, just a little. I'm not her mother, Jason. I'm yours. He looked down. I know. I took a breath, then act like it. Jason reached out as if to say something or maybe stop me, but I stepped back. You made a choice in silence. I'm making one out loud. I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. But just as I reached the curb, I heard the door creak open again. And Ellie's voice bright, oblivious. Daddy. Why was Grandma holding your old baby photo? It didn't take long to decide what I'd do. Harold had built Carson and Brightwell legal from a room over our garage. And every December, they held a quiet holiday toast for retired staff and family. They never uninvited me, though last year Emily forgot to mention it. This time, I went alone, hair pinned, cardigan pressed, USB drive tucked in my bag like a secret weapon. As I walked through the double glass doors, I saw Charles across the lobby, talking to Harold's old partner, Linda. He waved. Edith, you came. I need 10 minutes of the room, I said plainly. No more. Charles looked at me for a long second, then nodded. They moved the gathering to the conference room. About 24 people, light drinks, soft laughter, murmurs over holiday bonuses. Jason wasn't there, Emily wasn't either, but Linda was. And so was Daphne Harold's former assistant, now retired. She hugged me tightly, slipped something into my hand, a small envelope. I made a copy before I shredded anything. I thought it might come to this. Inside, a black USB, labelled in Daphne's handwriting, for her eyes first. I stood in front of the TV near the corner and plugged it in. Someone lowered the music, then the video played, security cam footage, office lobby, Emily entering, signing in. Then a cut to the meeting room. She hands papers to an intern, not Charles, not even legal staff, no ID verification, no witnesses. One page zoomed on screen, the forged amendment. My name, clear as day. The room went silent. Linda squinted at the screen. That's not protocol. Daphne cleared her throat. I was on medical leave. She slipped it in through accounting. I let the video run for 1 more minute, then turned to Charles. Will this hold? He nodded once. It's enough to start the reversal. A younger woman near the back whispered, Wait. Isn't that Jason's wife? I picked up my purse, turned to the room, said one thing only. This is why women over 70 write things down. Then I left. No one stopped me, but I saw Daphne wipe a tear as she folded the envelope back into her coat. I didn't go home right away. I stopped by the notary first. Her name was Lainey. She wore thick glasses and knew Harold from his early days as a tax attorney. She took one look at the printout from the video and said, That's not how this works. You were erased on paper. Let's write you back in. It was the kindest sentence I'd heard in months. I pulled out my folder planner pages, old signatures, the original will, even the index card with Ellie's cinnamon bread recipe. Lainey looked at the card and raised an eyebrow. I smiled. My real handwriting, all mine. We made copies, filed affidavits. She took down a sworn statement. I wrote every word myself. No lawyers, not yet. Just truth and ink. On the way out, I passed a mural on the side of the post office, a tree with children's handprints painted into the leaves. I touched one red palm print and thought, they tried to cut me off the branch, but I am the root. Back at home, I opened the cedar chest again. This time, I didn't just pull out old paperwork. I took out the marriage license, Jason's birth certificate, the quilt Emily never let Ellie use, the blue tulip teacup, still unbroken. I lined them up on the dining table like a memory ledger. Then I called Charles. I'm ready. You want to push it forward? I want it reversed. Every signature, every clause. I want the paper trail back in my name. He exhaled slowly. You sure? I wasn't. But now I've seen her hands. There was silence on the other end. Then, send me everything. I did. Scanned, labelled, sorted. In the planner, I wrote, January 3rd, petition to restore authority. Right below it, I added a note. Not to reclaim control, just to reclaim clarity. That night, I sat in my chair with a teacup warm in my hand. I wasn't drinking tea, I was holding a symbol, and this time, I wasn't going to let anyone put it back on a shelf. Jason used the spare key. It was Wednesday, late afternoon. Emily had asked him to check if the mail had stopped forwarding properly. She didn't want any sensitive documents ending up in the wrong hands. The house was dim when he walked in. Sunlight filtered through the curtains in narrow slants. Dust hung like breath that had nowhere to go. He stood in the entryway a long time. It smelled different now, less like cinnamon, more like paper and stillness. He stepped into the kitchen. The counter was clean, too clean. Only a planner sat open near the sink pages, crisp, ink recent. He read the top line, Petition to restore authority, January 3rd. His throat tightened. He moved through the living room next. His mother's chair still faced the window, the one she always called my watching spot. Her cardigan was draped neatly across the armrest, folded, not tossed. He picked it up. It was warm in memory, but cold in hand. A sigh slipped out of him before he could stop it. He turned slowly and walked toward the hallway, passing the photos still hung on the walls. Him in high school, Ellie at 3, covered in glitter and 1 year old, of Edith and Harold dancing in the backyard. Barefoot, he paused. That frame had been straightened, recently, deliberately. He stepped into the bedroom. The cedar chest sat open, empty. Only a single folded quilt lay on top, the one Edith had sewn during her chemo. The one Emily never let Ellie use. Jason sat on the edge of the bed, ran his hand across the fabric. He didn't say anything. But his shoulders folded inward, just slightly. A breath he held without knowing. Then came the sound of heels on hardwood. Emily. She stepped inside, saw him there. What are you doing? She asked gently but firmly. Jason stood, slower than usual. I was just checking. For mail? He didn't answer. She looked around the room. You know, she was never comfortable letting go of things. That's part of the problem. He looked at her. She wasn't the problem, he said. Emily's eyes flickered. Just once. Then she smiled. Well, maybe we just see it differently. She reached for his hand, but he didn't take it right away. He looked around the room once more, then down at the quilt, and finally at the planner page still sitting open on the kitchen counter. Edith sat at the table as the sun broke over the eastern trees, painting gold across the planner page. She dipped her fountain pen into blue ink, not the black of contracts, not the red of revisions, blue like the tulip teacup, and she began to write, not legal notes, not a demand, but something softer. Dear family, if you're reading this, it means I've chosen to speak without knocking. I have no expectations, no agenda, only memory, and maybe a little hope. She folded the letter slowly, placed it inside cream stationery embossed with vines, and tucked in a photo Jason as a baby in Harold's arms. One copy for Jason. Another, with Ellie's poem, for Ellie herself. Then she opened the cedar chest one final time and retrieved 3 more things. A cinnamon bread recipe card, this one, a copy, in Ellie's handwriting from 2 years ago, the quilt folded tight with lavender sachet inside, a blank card with nothing written yet sealed in a white envelope with a tulip sticker. She arranged them in a basket lined with soft blue cloth and walked it across the street just before 9 a.m. No doorbell. She placed it on the porch, stepped back, and turned toward home. But Ellie was already at the window, her little face brightened like morning. "Grandma!" Edith smiled and lifted one hand. Inside, Jason opened the door, looked down at the basket, picked up the letter first, then the recipe card. He didn't say anything, but he didn't close the door either. Back home, Edith made a cup of tea, not in silence, but in calm. She carried the cup to the front window, where the sun fell gently on her lap. Then, to herself, in a whisper only the porcelain could hear, "Let them come if they choose. This time, I'll be ready either way." The next Saturday, the house filled not with decorations or fanfare, but with feet. Soft slippers on hardwood, canes tapping lightly, children giggling behind books. Edith had invited her book club, the 2 librarians from the community centre, and 3 neighbourhood teens who used to mow her lawn for practice, not pay. And Ellie. Ellie came, holding the basket her grandmother had left, now filled with cookies and folded paper flowers she made herself. The table was set with mismatched plates and 5 tulip teacups, the 6th chipped but repaired with a thin gold seam sat in the centre as a reminder. Outside, the wind carried laughter toward the sidewalk. 2 women, walking dogs, paused. "Is that Edith Carson's house?" "Sure is. Looks like a gathering. I thought I thought she'd moved out." "No," the other said. "Looks like she's finally moved back in." Inside, Edith poured tea with practiced grace, the kind that says, "I've done this before, and I remember who I am when I do." One of the librarians stood, a younger woman with bright red glasses. "We brought something," she said, "from the reading programme." She held out a stack of folded notes, handwritten by children Edith had helped learn to read over the years. The top one said, "Mrs. Carson taught me how to finish a story." Edith pressed a hand to her chest, then smiled, not just with her mouth, but her whole presence. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means more than you know." Ellie tugged at her sleeve. "Grandma, can I sit next to you when I read mine?" "Of course, sweet pea." They sat on the quilt, now spread across the couch, the one Emily once called too sentimental, but here it felt like foundation. Ellie opened her paper and read, "My family likes TV and pizza, but my real favourite part is Grandma's cinnamon bread. She always saves the last piece for me." There was a beat of silence, then claps, then smiles. Then Edith looked out the window again. Jason's car was parked across the street. He hadn't come in, but the window on the passenger side was rolled down, and for a moment, she swore, just barely, she saw his hand lift in a small wave. After the tea was poured and stories were shared, the room quieted. The older librarian, the one who'd known Edith for decades, stood near the fireplace, holding a folded page. "Before we go," she said, "there's something else." She nodded toward a little girl sitting quietly by the end table, her name tag slightly crooked, Amira, age 9. Amira stood a bit shy, then stepped forward with a paper in both hands. "It's a story we wrote together at school," she said. "Mine is about someone real." She cleared her throat, then read, "There once was a lady who knew how to listen to people, even when they didn't know what they needed. She didn't talk loud or walk fast or wear shiny shoes, but she made space in a room, like light through a curtain. She made me want to read because she looked me in the eye when I said, 'I can't,' and she said, 'You don't have to be loud to matter, you just have to show up.'" The room fell silent. Edith closed her eyes for a moment. That line, "You just have to show up," was something she'd once told Ellie during a storm, when the power had gone out and the girl was scared of the dark. She opened her eyes again. Amira smiled. "That's what I wrote, but it's about you." Ellie leaned over and whispered, not quietly enough, "Grandma, she wrote the truth." Edith laughed gently, eyes shining. "Well, then we'd better write that on something permanent." The librarian stepped forward again, holding a leather-bound guest book. "We started this today, a community legacy log. We want to keep it in the children's reading room. Would you do us the honour of writing the first entry?" Edith blinked, stunned. "Me?" Amira nodded. "You taught us the first words, so you should write the first sentence." Edith looked at the pen they offered. Blue ink. She opened to the first page, wrote slowly, then read aloud. "It took me 70 years to understand that the loudest stories don't always shout. Sometimes they just wait to be heard." She signed her name and under it added, "Edith Carson, still here." Later that evening, the guests gone and dishes rinsed, Edith sat with Ellie on the porch swing. The sky was streaked with burnt orange. Windlight hour. Ellie curled beside her, one leg tucked under the quilt. "Grandma," she said suddenly, "do you know why I like writing poems?" "Why's that, sweetheart?" "Because they make quiet things feel loud." Edith smiled, brushing Ellie's hair behind her ear. "That's the best reason I've heard." From across the street, Jason's porch light flicked on. He stood alone, no Emily in sight. He didn't wave this time, but he placed something on their mailbox, then turned and walked back in. Ellie tilted her head. "Daddy left something." Edith stood slowly, walked across the lawn, the air damp with evening. On the mailbox, a folded paper, no envelope. She opened it. Inside, a photo, the one of Harold holding baby Jason, and behind it, a sticky note in Jason's handwriting. She was right. You don't erase what made you. No apology, no request, just that. She looked back across the street. The curtain shifted. Inside, Jason stood with Ellie's drawing taped to the fridge, the one with 3 stick figures. Only now, a 4th had been added, drawn in pink crayon, labelled G. That night, Edith lit one small candle at her bedside, then opened her planner. On the final page she wrote, "Today, I was seen, not for what I gave, but for who I stayed." She closed the book gently, then opened the drawer and pulled out a new journal blank. She placed it on Ellie's pillow for the next visit. A post-it on top read, "Start anywhere." She turned out the light, the planner resting under her palm, the last thing she whispered into the dark. Not forgotten, not removed, rooted. It's strange how silence can sound different once you stop fearing it. My house is quiet again. No guests, no conflict, no voices raised behind polite smiles. But it doesn't feel empty. The blue tulip teacup sits on the windowsill now, not hidden in a cabinet, not wrapped in tissue, just there. Sunlight catching its hairline crack, the gold repair line shining soft like an old scar. The planner is closed. The journal for Ellie waits with her favourite pen inside it. Blue ink, of course. She'll come next Thursday. She already called to ask if we could bake. Jason hasn't said much, but he sent over a copy of the notarized correction, the property returned to sole ownership. My name restored. No ceremony, no signature from Emily. Just a quiet envelope, signed in blue. Charles called last night. Satisfied? He asked. I said yes. But really, it wasn't the papers that gave me peace. It was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to be explained to anyone. Not as a mother. Not as a guest. And definitely not as an inconvenience. I sit in my chair, Harold's blanket over my knees, and listen. Outside, the neighbourhood breathes. A delivery truck rumbles by. Laughter floats from a yard 3 houses down. Someone plays piano through an open window, and then a sound that doesn't come often. A knock. Just one. I open the door slowly. Ellie stands there, hair a mess, cheeks red. She holds out a folded page. I wrote the first line, she says. I take it gently. It reads, "Quiet things matter." I nod. Then I let her in, not just through the door, but into the story I thought I'd been erased from. We sit by the window, drink tea from mismatched cups, read and write, and burn nothing down. Just grow things quietly, like roots.